Greetings and welcome to another episode of Genre. With me today is returning guest and host of Tracks of the Damned, Patrick Ripoll. Say hello, Patrick.
Hey, how's it going?
It's going all right. You know, if you follow me on Twitter, which probably almost nobody does, I had some surgery. They took out my thyroid, and that thing is real close to the voice box and throat, and there's even a possibility they could sever the nerves. So I didn't really want to plan too much for July. And so I asked Patrick, hey, how about we just do a kind of off the cuff one? This was my idea, you see. We do an off the cuff one. I don't have to do a lot of research, and we can just do it when my voice feels better. And then I ruined the whole thing by suggesting that we do a addendum to our already 4-episode long look back at shot on video horror movies. Somehow I made
4.5 if you count the mixtape I made.
That's true, plus a mixtape. So a good 8 hours of content already. And somehow I made more work for myself. Instead of watching 3 to 6 movies, we had to watch a lot. So the short version is go back to listen to at least episode 1 of our other shot on video horror look back. But the idea here is that we're covering films that were shot on some sort of video, beta tape, VHS tape, super VHS, anything that's not film and not digital, because that once digital comes around, we just could never possibly cover everything, because now you make a million at a time. And the fun of it is these are things that sort of, a lot of them just sort of escaped into the wild during the home video boom of the 80s. And then also we're trying to make sure everything we're covering qualifies as a horror movie, doing our best in that, because we hadn't seen
for this addendum, I would say that there are a couple that are edge cases. But we'll talk about that when we get to them.
And so I made a new list and put it on Letterboxd, so we could look at things that we either hadn't gotten at all, like that just went under the radar to the point where they weren't on our original master list. But then I also added a couple things that we didn't get from the original master list. So I think it's only 2 movies that we meant to cover last time that we covered this time instead. But these are mostly things that we didn't really know much about. 3 movies I see now. 3 movies that we missed last time. These are movies that we've discovered in the interim, basically. And it's a total of 23 movies. Some of them are very short. I watched 12.
I ended up only watching 11, so you win.
I guess I win. Some of these are just literally gone. Like I did all I could to find them. But a lot of them I know about now because companies have been releasing them on Blu-ray. So there's a couple
Some of these
that
didn't exist the last time we recorded, I don't think.
Exactly.
Well, actually,
so
I don't know when Jungle Trap Blu-ray was released, but
yeah, we didn't. I didn't know it was shot on video. It was released in 2016. It says here, so it technically didn't exist, but just barely. Anyway, this is going to.
I think you hear a droning outside my window right now, and I do apologize for that noise.
Oh yeah, well there's construction too outside my window, so people can just sort of
beautiful. We're recording this inside of a cement mixer, so
yeah. No, just imagine yourself hanging out with your 2 absolute dorkiest friends, and there's construction outside.
Right. The video store is adding an adult section. It's like a little what do you call the additions to the buildings? It's like
an add-on. That's what I always
an
call
add-on.
Sure. And just to set the mood even further, it's fucking humid as hell here in Minnesota.
Oh yeah. I think it's getting up to 110 heat index here in Chicago. So we're happy about that.
Good times. So just to set the mood. But yeah, let's get into this. We're gonna.
I think of shot on video as being a summertime sort of.
For some reason, I don't know why.
I think it's because heat affects the videotape itself. So whenever there is those like videotape artifacts or slightly warbly audio or whatever, it sounds like heat. And then the way that light, especially bright lights or colored lights, sort of glow, it's a very hot medium. And speaking of the medium, I do want to say, if you are not familiar with the 8 hours that we already recorded on SOV, if you go back to that first part, the first 20 minutes, we sort of talk about the history and culture of shot on analog video films and the sort of history of the direct video market in the 80s and stuff like that. So we don't have to cover all that here again.
Yeah, and another 20 minutes to what? I don't know how long this is going to be. The other reason I think summer works is because some of these are literally children in the summertime when there's no school shooting movies.
Yeah, that's a big part of it. I
a
think
couple
you're
of
right.
those on this list. So yeah, let's jump into it. We're going to go in release order as best we can tell. The release order is because some of these, end up being filmed years and years before they get any sort of release. But
Sure.
we're going to start with Demon Queen, which was included on
Finally.
our other list, but we just didn't get to it.
We
and
spent
this is
so
actually
much.
I was going to say this is the only Donald Farmer movie I've ever seen. You watched the Donald Farmer movies last time. If I think you watched Savage Vengeance, or you didn't watch any of them. So this is our first Donald Farmer. Yeah.
Yeah. I thought going into it the previous time that we would just be talking about Donald Farmer and Tim Ritter movies, and we ended up talking about neither. So yeah. I was excited to finally dive into the world of Donald Farmer.
Yeah, so this was, I believe, his first as far as anything had any kind of release on video. 1987. It's cool. Honestly, I kind of liked it, and I was under the impression that Donald Farmer movies were all this sort of just TNA and kind of really subpar effects work. But Demon Queen has some effort behind its. I should also say, Bleeding Skull, the book, claims that this is not really like his other movies, so perhaps this is a good thing. Maybe we won't like the other Donald Farmer movies.
I mean, it feels like I'm charting a course to owning Cannibal Hookers on Blu-ray one way or another. Like at some point in the future, that's going to happen. So I'll find out eventually.
Yeah. And Savage Vengeance is the one I really knew about because it was sold as a I Spit on Your Grave sequel.
Yes, with the same lead actor who had Camille Keaton, who had a terrible time on Savage Vengeance.
Yeah,
but we already talked about that on the last episodes. Demon Queen is really cool for me, first and foremost, because of the score. It has that classic droning, lo-fi synth score that you associate with shot on video, and it has a really good version of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's it moves better than some of the other ones.
It's like 54 minutes long.
It actually, speaking of the length, it's 54 minutes long, but it really ends very suddenly at the 48-minute mark, and then there's about 6 minutes of them replaying all the gore gags that they had put so much effort and time into, and probably money. So it's really under an hour long plus some extra bits, but it's I see. The problem is I watched so many of these, and I watched this first, so I'm trying to remember which storyline is which.
This is the drug dealer who owes a lot of money to some very dangerous men, but then a vampire woman kills one of them and scares the other off. And then in return, she wants a place to lay low for a while. Why she needs a place to lay low, this is Demon Queen, it's really not clear. She seems to be doing just fine before this moment. But
yeah, that's right. And so it's sort of set up as this sort of combat shock, or even like I would say combat shock is a good place to go for. It's set up like this like shock machine, but the plot, the central thing with the succubus is kind of sweet natured. It's like she seems to just kind of want to hang out, and eventually she does become a succubus and steal his soul and stuff. But there's a period at the beginning of the movie where it seems like she just wants to hang out and live with this guy and his girlfriend.
Yeah, I think Mary Finero is the vampire succubus lead or whatever. I think she just gives a good performance. Mm-hmm. It does unusually for, again, what I had assumed Donald Farmer's reputation was. It is unusually character driven, where it is much more about the love triangle between this drug dealer and his sort of addict girlfriend who he's really not into anymore.
Mhm.
And this new intriguing woman who just saved his life, who's got something weird going on because she was able to kill those two gangsters like it was nothing, and he's having these crazy awesome colored lighting, slow motion, just absolutely so much breast sucking sex dreams about her. um,
There's a period where it feels like it's almost going to be like Neil Jordan's Mona Lisa,
oh yeah.
but with a succubus and shot on video instead of a prostitute.
Mhm. Generally, the way the camera is utilized, like the framing and stuff, it is just sort of inept. There's not a lot of like when you watch a J.R. Bookwalter or just a
Mhm.
J.W. Bookwalter movie, like Kingdom of the Vampires or Ozone. There's moments where you're like, oh, this is someone who understands like how to use a dolly and how to
Mhm.
this or that. And generally, Donald Farmer is are both people in the shot? Okay, cool, let's go. But
Love
there
it.
are some good moments of direction, the way it edits from scene to scene and stuff like that. It's not totally inept. And I think the gore effects are genuinely very good.
Yeah, the gore effects are, even when they're not realistic, they're super gross, and there's something likable about filmmakers who like, I can't make this look like a real injury, but I can make it look like the most rancid injury imaginable.
Right. I can't have like a really convincing throat slitting sort of prosthetic appliance on someone's neck, but I can soak a some butcher parts in fake blood and then pull
Yeah.
them out of a torn up shirt in close up. Um,
Yeah, this dude's heart is like as big as his head is one of the notes I have.
it's
He's
very
like
good.
using like a cow's heart.
I feel like this movie probably has its reputation because it delivers what you want out of shot on video, where it has a cool droning score. It's got a lot of nudity in it. It's got really good, sort of repulsive gore. And then the most important thing for a shot on video horror movie, of course, is the sort of ancillary texture, because these aren't movies shot in studios. They're outshot in the real world. And you just get like, this is shot in Florida in the 80s, and there's just all sorts of little bits and touches here and there where you're getting the vibe of where Donald Farmer lives. There's like a
Mhm.
establishing shot in one scene where there's like a porn protest going on where these people
Right,
have
and that's a
signs.
really clever cut. It cuts right from a gore scene to this porn protest that I'm sure was a
Um,
thing he just happened upon. I don't think that was staged by him.
there's a scene in a food court where all of the tables in the food court have tablecloths, and I thought that was one of the most captivating details I'd ever seen in a movie. And I'm like, in the 80s, were they trying to like pass off malls as classy and they had tablecloths on their food court? That's insane. There's a
I bet
scene in
they
a video
didn't.
store, and they
Yeah.
have a little, of course, like shot on video horror movie video store conversation where people are name dropping, Michael Barrymore and Udo Kier and stuff like that.
Mhm.
It's just, which is always
Yeah,
obnoxious.
and the guy is basically comic book guy from The Simpsons, if he ran a video store. And I feel like he's played by a guy called Robert Tidwell, but I feel like Farmer kind of intended him as a tongue-in-cheek stand-in. I feel like that was like this. These are me and my buddies, and we get how fucking annoying we can be.
Yeah. There's a movie we're going to be talking about in a little bit that is another conversation about horror movies that is way less charming. But and then the problem with this movie is I think they kind of ran out of money, and everything at the end wraps up extraordinarily quickly in a kind of baffling way.
I just remembered there is one effect of a guy who gets his face ripped that is actually quite good. There's like a
hmm I,
skull underneath,
I think there's a pulsing neck wound as well that I was a fan of.
and
Uh,
the makeup design is credited to Rick Gonzalez, who I guess during the Florida unit scenes in Day of the Dead was one of Tom Savini's assistants. So this is probably the best guy you can get on a budget in all of Florida in 1986, 87 to do your gore
yeah.
effects. Yeah, and you did say something about the music, and I can't remember if you did or not, but Jan Haflin is the name of the composer. And
Okay.
my note was that yeah, the droning part's right, but it also, it kind of reminds me of those mystery adventure 8-bit video games that
Okay.
for some reason were scary, even though they were barely playable in 8-bit. But there was always like something about that particular brand of electronic music that would creep me out as a kid.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, I think the thing about video game music, and I think this also is very true of a most shot on video horror movie music, is that it's very limited. It's usually like a 16 or 32 bar loop, and then you just hear that for hours.
Hmm.
And a lot of SOV movies have really like three pieces of music that just keep getting repeated over and over again, and they kind of drill a hole into your brain. And it's if they're good, it's a very pleasing effect to me.
Um, yeah, the one last thing I have on this is that very me kind of thing is that there's a painting that adorns the video box and is over the opening credits of this woman who's screaming and her face is kind of disintegrating from her the middle of her jaw down. And it's the same image that was used on a poster for Umberto Lenzi's Nightmare City, and it's on some of the European video boxes for Lucio Fulci's City of the Living Dead. And so it's this image I always see, and so I decided to finally look into it. All these people stole it from the cover of a book called Star Child, a sci-fi horror book, and it was illustrated by a guy named Les Edwards. And you can also find version of it on the Turkish poster for The Exorcist and the UK video release for the John Cassavetes, well, the movie starring John Cassavetes called Incubus. And you can, and in this movie, you can see it in the background of the drug dealer's house. So this was an image that wasn't just randomly picked by the video company, as it was in a lot of cases. This is something that Farmer was really into, this particular image, and used it for the credits and the box and his in the background.
Excellent. Well, we're jumping ahead. The next one is Sexandroid. A
Sexandroid.
French Sexandroid. That's right. It's one word.
I didn't
From
realize it was
1987.
French. I didn't realize it was French, and I thought that they were trying to be clever by adding an E onto Android.
Well, I mean, Michel Ricaud, the director, kind
Yeah,
of gives it away. There's
yeah.
the reason one could watch this movie and not realize it's French is because I don't think there's any dialogue in this movie.
No, there's not.
So this is the first hit we're going to hit where we go, is this a horror movie?
Is this a movie?
And I will say, if you wanna watch this movie and say yes, I would classify it as horror or horror adjacent, I will give it to you. There is 0% chance that this was marketed as a horror movie.
Yeah,
This is definitely a fetish video that was sort of marketed to adult audiences.
it's yeah, it's well, and also if you're expecting sex androids like robots, you're going to be sorely disappointed.
Yeah.
I think that the title is supposed to have something to do with the fact that two out of the three bits in here are just Granguignol. Like one of them is literally a stage Granguignol stage magic show. And while watching this, I looked up. I wanted to make sure I was pronouncing Granguignol correctly, and having really no knowledge of French, apparently that translates to large puppet.
Very
And
good.
and so that made me think android, kind of a puppet.
Sure.
I
A
don't know.
voodoo doll in the first scene
And then
that
there's a
certainly
voodoo doll, which is sort of a puppet.
turns the
Yes.
woman into a large puppet.
Yeah, so I was it's the kind of movie where things are just happening and your mind wanders
Oh
and
yeah.
trying to find meaning in the title.
A majority of the runtime is a like 30-minute snuff sequence.
So it starts with it's basically it's an anthology. If we're going to
Yes.
call it a movie, it's an anthology.
It's not presented as one. There's no host. There's no
No.
framing device, but it is an anthology. There's no connective tissue between the three scenes.
Yeah. And the first part, well actually no, I want to go into Ricaud. He I looked into him a little bit, and not surprisingly, he directs pornography.
Yes.
And I was trying to somebody has filled out the descriptions on IMDb for basically every one of his movies. I'm starting to think it's him because a lot of it's in broken English.
Very good.
And so I was trying to get a sense if he had ever done any other horror, and a lot of them sound like they're just straight up fetish, like abuse movies basically. I don't really know a lot about the history of fetish movies, but these are ones with people having sex and getting beaten, and like rape fantasies and stuff like that.
Yes, they are violent sexual fantasies where directed towards women. Yeah.
Yeah.
The first one is a woman at a bar. It's a very strange bar. It looks like a subway tunnel, and it has a stock ticker on the wall.
Mm-hmm.
It was a very confusing moment, and then luckily it does not matter, because what she does is she goes into the bathroom, and elsewhere some unknown person is torturing her via a voodoo doll. Her clothes get ripped off. She starts bleeding profusely out of her genitals. Her throat gets torn open. At some point she's hovering in the air, which I found very interesting, like metaphysically, how if someone can pick up a voodoo doll and move it over to a candle where, you know, it burns their face or whatever, and move it over this, how do you communicate to the voodoo doll that you are picking it up, not to just sort of adjust the position of it, but to make the person fly? Because at no point is she flying as she's, you know, as he's moving the voodoo doll elsewhere. But at any rate,
My reading of it was that she was like sort of being hung by
yeah,
invisible noose.
I think you're right. But so she's hung. It's just a woman being stripped and tortured and murdered in a bathroom.
And it's not particularly convincing as far as the effects. It's really, but it is edited. It is the one piece
Yes.
here that is edited, and there are choices made for camera angles.
This is not a stage show that someone placed in front of a camera, which is how would you describe the other two scenes. The second scene takes up the majority of it. A woman goes into a bizarre, sort of strange basement. She hides from this zombie. She performs. I'm trying to think.
She performs like a fire dance.
That's right. At some point, she's setting the tips of her fingers on fire. I thought that was a cool effect.
And she whips out. Yeah, she does a little dance with flaming sticks, and she flogs herself a bit.
Yes, there's some real flogging. The fun thing about this second scene is that it does a mix of sort of sleight of hand magician gore and actual, like, at some point this zombie who comes back and, you know, starts torturing her is actually putting needles like through her breasts. I think, and her tongue as well. I can't recall, but like those scenes are real. And then later when he cuts off her nipple with a straight razor and eats it, like that's just a bit of sleight of hand.
Yeah. And it really is a sleight of hand. I think that's the thing that keeps it from being too disturbing. Yeah. Like it is, like the fact that he's definitely for real piercing nipples with needles, which I know is something stage shows do. I know that she's not being hurt. This is
not an uncommon S&M practice, is the needle play and stuff like that. So,
so I know that this is being staged, and she's a part of it, and she's clearly a part of it because she'll anyway.
And there is a theatrical element to it where, because there's no dialogue, like she is screaming at certain points, but then at other certain points she seems to be sort of in a trance and seems to be being aroused by it, and she sort of goes back and forth in a way that is, it doesn't feel like they're trying to make it look like snuff. It does feel like a performance.
Yeah, and the sleight of hand stuff, like he's doing it. The camera really barely moves, and you can see him palming things, and like you can see it's a magic show that's gross. It's Grand Guignol, textbook Grand Guignol.
Yes, this is the one that is absolutely Grand Guignol. Yeah,
and it makes me wonder. There's no information on it, but it makes me wonder and or assume that this director just knew people who did this.
Yeah,
I'm sure he belongs to a group of people who do all sorts of performance art, sexual performance art and stuff. So
yeah, and that's what this is, and it's funny because like when I just say it out loud, I'm almost giggling because it's just so beyond the pale, and it's so like the moral panic around a lot of horror movies in the 80s and stuff was this premise that you know, that slasher movies are just pornography where the sex has been replaced with murder, but they are made for the same reason. And like when people are talking about that, they are talking about actually like this is the thing they're talking about. That you know, clearly Prom Night is not that. But it's almost like on the one hand, it's like if you are a psychopath who gets aroused by the idea of inflicting pain on others, like you probably would find this a very sexy movie. Like it's not like, as you sit and watch it, it's not hard, especially because it's so long and drawn out. It's not hard for your mind to wander to be like, okay, this is a fetish film. Like, who would be masturbating to this? And to get
Yeah.
a little like grossed out. But on the other hand, it is just so theatrical. Like, the guy's dressed like Frankenstein, and it's just so silly.
Yeah. Yeah.
That it almost offends me less than than some sleazy elements in other movies that are like trying to be more of a narrative.
Right. And then there's a third vignette,
Yes.
which is the least theatrical and the least cinematic.
And the least explicable. It's one of those things where you go, what is this about? Like, who sits through scene number 2 and then is like, no, I'm waiting for the grand finale, a very bad naked dance to barely audible Tina Turner.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like sort of a guy who I think is supposed to be a vampire, but he looks like the Joker and Frankenstein and Dracula kind of mixed.
Yeah.
He strips and bites this woman's neck, and I guess that turns her into a vampire, and she reawakens. And like I'm being as literal as possible here. She sits up and dances nude to Tina Turner's "I Might Have Been a Queen" and "What's Love Got to Do with It." And I mean the entirety of both songs, including the space on the record or tape where there's silence between them.
They just hit play.
Yeah, they just hit play for 2 songs, and she improvised a dance that's mostly the same 3 or 4 moves over and over again. And the sound mix is so bad that I actually didn't know there was music. I thought so I turned it up real fuck loud, and then I'm like, oh, it's Tina Turner. And so the problem with that is that the only other sound on the mix is the vampire going, oh, hey. And that becomes so loud if you've got a surround sound system and you're trying to hear the Tina Turner music. So suddenly there's like this little like, what's love got to do? That to do with it? What's it was so jarring and weird. And then it ends with her getting into the coffin with him, and I guess like that's I don't know. It was definitely that they realized they needed another 10 minutes to make it feel like it was feature length, I guess. The end. Really weird movie.
It's even calling it a movie is like it's a weird videotape.
Yeah.
I don't think anyone who's making it was thinking about it as anything but like a videotape for a specific market, and as opposed to a film. It's just that when IMDb rolls around, 15 years later, everything becomes a film.
Yeah. Especially Letterboxd. I feel like Letterboxd changed that even more. Now TV series or films too.
Oh yeah, every episode of Black Mirror is a film. So the next one we're going to be talking about. I'm sorry. Do you have anything else about?
No, I was gonna move on too. Yeah.
I have not seen this film. I started it and I kind of clocked it as shot on film. Mm-hmm. So I prioritized some other stuff. But you did watch this film.
Yeah, this was something I had already seen. It's called Conton. It's Conton. It's a Japanese indie extreme horror, and I do think it was probably shot 8 or 16 millimeter, and that it was just edited on video, because there's something about the artifacts. You don't see any obvious scratches. It looks like a film that has been degraded by being put onto video. So if somebody knows, because I couldn't find out, I tried researching it. If anybody knows if this was definitively shot on film, I apologize. But I still felt like it fit the 80s do-it-yourself horror aesthetic, and we didn't have a Japanese movie yet. And there's a very interesting thing that I might never cover because it's actually really disturbing. But we've talked about the German underground of the 80s, and we're actually going to talk about more here. But the Japanese underground doesn't really get covered, and it sort of peaked with the guinea pig movies, I think, are what most people know, and those were shot on film but look like absolute junk on purpose. And they're essentially just effects reels. The title of this one, I don't know what Conton means, or cotton, again, Conton. The Japanese title is Jûshin densetsu, and it really is, it's an effects reel, and the effects are really elaborate and surrealistic. And it's a 45-minute movie. It's a man who also owes money. It's funny watching it directly after Demon Queen, because they're both about down on their luck guys who owe large sums of money to unsavory people. But this one is an otaku, as we would call them now. There's a whole bit where he has a pretty girl who's interested in him and hanging out at his house, but he's spending all his time ignoring her and working on his model kits, which are kind of kaiju monster, robot monsters. It looks like the director, Takuro Fukada, just had this need to make these cool effects. And it appears to have been inspired by Shinya Tsukamoto and his Japanese cyberpunk stuff. But this movie actually predates Tetsuo the Iron Man by a couple years. It's interesting to have two different Japanese filmmakers that are basically inspired by the energy of the Evil Dead movies and then the transformation effects of stuff like American Werewolf in London.
And then it also makes me wonder if there are non-film influences that they're both like, if there's a manga or something that's happening around the time that that is also a point of inspiration.
And that was something I've been looking into more in recent years. But yeah, I don't know a lot about the horror manga of this period, and so there's something behind, because also this is around when Akira hits. I mean, cyberpunk was there's a movie called Burst City that predates them. That's a sort of Mad Max riff. And so it's a little hard to call this cyberpunk, but I would call it cyberpunk overall, just because it's basically just transformation stuff with a very thin plot. And the transformation stuff is really good. And the guy wears his inspirations on his sleeve. The opening title is just the exact same as The Thing with the light coming through. And the music is also interesting because it's credited to Asayo Yamada, who doesn't directly lift certain songs, but is super duper inspired by Claudio Simonetti's Phenomena and Demons score. And there's the main track that's like plays throughout the movie. It's the most driving track. Is almost literally a mix of Demons title track, which is called Killing, and the sleepwalking theme from Phenomenon. And you can see that Bava and Argento were also, the sort of smoky music video look and super saturated lighting was all part of what they were going for here. So it's not actually lifting music, but it is very closely following music. The last thing I have on this is also about the soundtrack. There's a song that plays during the attempted date, and it's meant to be the chorus from the Kansas song "Point of No Return."
Yeah.
And it's funny because looking that up, I now know that the title of that song is "Point of KNOW Return."
Oh, Kansas.
Yeah, I never knew that until
So
right
now. What's more disappointing, Kansas the state or Kansas the band?
Yeah, exactly. It is a cool melody to the little thing that they ripped off. So I guess I'll give Kansas the band the slight edge there.
Okay. Okay.
But then did you watch the next one, Hollywood's New Blood?
I didn't. I don't think we need to spend too much time on it though.
No, I'm gonna I watched this one. It was fucking boring. It was included on the original list. We didn't cover it. It's James Shyman, who wrote and directed Slashdance just after that, which was shot on film. And so this is actually available as an extra feature on the Slashdance Blu-ray. And I have to admit, when I started watching it, I looked on Letterboxd and I saw our friend Bill gave this a 0.5-star rating. And
if Bill Ackerman can't find
if
something,
Bill Ackerman, yeah, if Bill Ackerman's not enjoying himself watching regional horror, I'm like, it's one of those movies that could be confused with a normal low budget horror movie. Like the shot on video aspects aren't really any different. They thought out the cinematography. They use consumer grade cameras like you would see used for soap opera or TV show, so it looks decent as far as the quality is. That they have camera tracking. The synth score isn't memorable, but it's well composed and it has a lot to it, and it's probably actually more professionally musical than something you'd hear from a lot of shot on film horror slashers from the time. And it runs a theater friendly hour and 17 minutes, though like Demon King, the opening credits and a recap end credits last a lot of that time. So it's really closer to an hour.
Yeah.
The cast is actually decent, like decent for what you'd find in your local theater. There's a plot. Yeah, it's just really dull. The storyline is really similar to the 1983 slasher Curtains. I
Okay.
don't know if you saw that one, and then they're both about actors who are sequestered in Forest Mansion in order to work on their characters, and then someone starts bumping people off. I don't think that Shyman ripped that movie off, because then he just goes other weird places. If he did rip that movie off, it was just one of many things he was ripping off, because uh, it's set up like, and then they were none with actors, but then crazed hillbillies with facial sores show up and start. It basically it. It's what you do when you have no teenager actors, but you want to do a Friday 13th summer camp thing. You instead of it being summer camp, it's an actors camp.
Sure.
There's no on-screen gore, just some blood. Uh, Very badly done. There's a lot of promise of sex and nudity, but none of it makes it on screen. So there'll be people like sneak away to have sex, and they'll make out for a little bit, and then they'll be killed. The only intentional see, it wasn't even unintentionally funny, it was just boring. The one unintentional laugh it got out of me is the hero instructs a woman to sharpen the old bones they've found, because he can't find any weapons. So she's supposed to be taking bones and turning them into knives, and she immediately starts rubbing the bones on a fireplace right next to some pokers and shovels that would make really good weapons against basic rednecks with facial sores. It sort of plays off because she sharpens the inside of the skull, and the very end of the movie is they slam the skull onto the last bad guy's face, and so he has a human skull stuck onto the front of his face, and he screams and falls dead.
That
So
is creative.
that's it. That's it. That's the cool part of the whole movie, and yeah, it was very dull. It was maybe my least favorite of all of these.
Yeah.
So the end. Moving on to
Now,
one I didn't see.
yeah, if we're talking about the sort of dull, uninteresting effect of a movie that is professionally made but without flavor, um, Halloween Party is its mirror image. It is its exact opposite. This is a movie that I've been dreaming about finding since we started doing these SOV podcasts, which is to say, we talked about this a little bit on the first part about how technically if you and your friends ever put green makeup on your face and went raw to the camera and made a little like dumb monster movie, you are a shot on video horror filmmaker just like any of these other people are. And I found it, like Carl Suknick's Alien Beasts. That's close, but he's kind of an artist, and there's some cool stop motion at the end. Like that's a different vibe, and like Trash Cans of Death or whatever that one was called. Like that one is like a parody movie, so it doesn't
Yeah.
have quite the same vibe. Halloween Party is teenagers, young teenagers. I think they're probably in like 15 or 16, improvising more or less a slasher movie that is like 20 minutes long. That was shown on Connecticut public access. It was part of this thing called the DJP Halloween special, and it was like this hour-long Halloween mixtape that the director Dave Skowronski like put together. And the movie Halloween Party is part of it. But if you go on YouTube and you look up Halloween Party, you're also going to get a little bit of the other parts, which includes a choreographed music video for the Monster Mash featuring the cast of Halloween Party. Also part of this hour-long Halloween special was an early Super 8 short that he shot called Sasquatch, and a sequence where there were monster masks lip syncing to Bon Jovi's Living on a Prayer. It really is just like, what do kids do when they are like doofy and just being dumb in front of their cameras? Like we talked about how when you were a little kid, you would set up the camcorder and then dance to Phil Collins. Like they literally set up a camcorder and then dance around to Monster Mash. It's absolutely outstanding. So Halloween Party involves a lot of stolen music. It opens with stolen music from 2001, the scene where they are on the moon, and that sort of growing chanting sound as they find the monolith on the moon. There is a cemetery. A hand bursts out. The dead are coming back to life. Cut to high school. They're going to be a party tonight. Make sure you get to the party. Turns out the girl who's hosting the party, she lives in the house that an old farmer used to live in, or at least it's on the land where this old farmer used to kill a bunch of people. And the way you know this is because the most nervous person in the movie has the job of delivering the exposition. And I have transcribed word for word how she delivers this exposition, because it is just one of the most remarkably awkward things I've ever seen in a movie, and it filled me with so much joy, because it is clearly, again, all the dialogue is improvised. They're told, like, this is the scene where you talk about this and argue about this, and then you decide to go to the kitchen and go. And so it's got that, like, just little kids going, I think no, and like talking over each other and stuff.
Yeah.
And so this character on the couch gives the exposition, and as soon as it is her turn to start talking in the scene, she gets very nervous and starts stuttering. And this is what she says. She says, "But do you know what I heard? This kid, John was telling me about this. He says where this house, very house, moving, and the whole new development and everything, still farming. You know, the farmer." And everything, and the guy who used to live there, Farmer Fletcher, the guy was murdering people. It's breathtaking. It's beautiful. The phone line is dead, so people have to go out to a pizza. They stop in the middle of the road because the zombies there. There's a pretty cool, like, rubber masked killer who's, it's the traditional, like, Halloween store killer, where it's a plaid shirt and jeans and a Halloween mask and a knife. And it's a pretty creepy looking mask. Kills the people in the car, including one of the people in the car is that young woman who delivers that exposition, and she has the immortal line, "Oh, now what? You guys do and go and get a pizza. What can be worse than this?" And then she's killed. There's music from Halloween.
Great on a shirt.
I would love to you should sell t-shirts that say, "Oh, now what? You guys do and go and get a pizza. What could be worse than this?" Stolen music includes Halloween, Halloween 2, I think The Incredible Melting Man from the beginning of that movie. I could be wrong, or it could be Night of the Living Dead. It's that kind of little analog synth sort of a thing. But I definitely recognize it. So it's from a movie I've seen. There's a scene where an actor at the beginning of a scene farts and no one acknowledges it. It's just I mean,
do we stop? No, keep going.
Yeah. There are moments where at the beginning of a shot you hear the tail end of the director cueing the person with their line. So you just hear the words "Ani," and then you see the actor on screen go, "Johnny." The closest thing gets to a sex scene is there is two teenagers massaging each other fully clothed in a bed, which I think is awesome. Definitely. Other interesting thing about this is it's almost all women in this movie. It's not a dude and a bunch of his dorky friends. I don't know if this guy was just friends with a lot of girls, or if he saw this as an opportunity to, like, hang out with a bunch of girls from school or whatever. But it is the rare shot on video horror movie that is largely female driven. The killer comes, the lights go out, killer kills people. There's a chase. There's one really good, actually effective, creepy. Most of this is shot, like, camera is wide enough that everyone's in a master shot, and if they're too far away from the camera and you can barely hear them, well, that's your problem. But there is one good shot where the light is attached to the camera and it's running after her as she's fleeing in the dark, and it's got that, like, kind of Cops effect where, like, only the immediate vicinity around her is lighting up as she's running, and that was kind of creepy and scary. And then she gets killed, and the killer walks away as "Welcome to My Nightmare" plays. And in the credits, cast is the word "cast" is followed by a comma instead of a colon, so it's like it's saying "cast Becky Phillips" as a sentence. So I enjoyed that. And then after that, you get this, like, horror host guy, and presumably this horror host guy introduced the film earlier as part of this whole little block of time on the public access thing, but on the version that's on YouTube, this is the first instance we get of him. He has ping pong ball eyes. It's clearly the director, and he clearly is improvising very bad jokes. The movie proper is 24 minutes, and then he follows that movie with 6 minutes of bloopers, which I think is literally just every other shot that didn't make it into the movie. It is incredibly boring to watch children stand there and go, "What? Why? Oh, okay." Like, they're not, this is not Burt Reynolds and what's his name from Cannonball Run. They're not. They're not having a grand old time. You do not get to see Jackie Chan smash his face into something. It's just a bunch of children standing around, not sure they actually want to be making a movie, but whatever. It was shot over the course of a night. It's fine. And then after that, we have, I have in my notes here, literally achieved the SOV horror equivalent of little kids dancing to music in front of the camera. The Monster Mash is somewhat choreographed, but not entirely. And then after this, oh man, this kid, my heart goes out to him. It's so beautiful. He does this little improvised speech about, like, we're gonna do this again next year, and if you like this, send it. Like, he gives him his home address presumably, and he goes, if you wanted to send in ideas for movies, or like if you wanted to make a movie with me, or like if you wanted to make your own movie and send it in, you should do that. And it's like very clear, like, oh, this kid wants to have more movie making friends. It's so great. And then there are like proper end credits set to Attack of the Killer Tomatoes. And then he says, "See you next year." And as far as I know, there was no next year.
As far as I know, they were never seen again.
They were never seen again. He at some point, like in my head canon, he got a girlfriend, and then he was just like, "Oh yeah, that was a silly thing I did once," and he went on to live a normal life, and he's a dentist now or whatever. But it is the lowest rent, most home video, most just kids goofing off in front of a camera entry that we have covered so far. And I just absolutely adored it, as long as it wasn't showing bad, dumb bloopers. And again, it is on YouTube, and it is 24 minutes. So if you are the kind of person who likes watching like slasher movie fan films made by children and stuff like that, like, check out Halloween Party from 1989.
Yeah. Well, then we're gonna again change gears to another almost real movie. In Dream Stalker, which was another one that I believe we had on our original list and just didn't find in time. And it is available on Intervision DVD as a double feature with Death by Love, which also appears to be shot on video. And I should say right now, we did not watch that one. I did not import, or I shouldn't say import, I didn't buy this DVD in time. So
I have the info on Death by Love right here. Death by Love is from 1991. It's not directed by the same guy. It's directed by someone named Alan Grant. It's shot in Dallas.
The paleontologist.
Yes, it's the paleontologist. It's in his home in the Dallas suburbs. So now you know where Alan Grant lived in 1991. It's this sort of blood-sucking Casanova character, and the director casts himself in a bunch of sex scenes, and it's more sex scenes than horror scenes. And apparently it is somewhat competent. So that's the info I have on Death by Love. Okay.
Well, maybe we'll end up, one of us will get the DVD for an Intervision, because it has interviews, and maybe that would help us learn the backstory of Dreamstalker. So for now, we're mostly just guessing. You watched this one too, correct?
Oh boy, did I.
Yeah. So this, as the title indicates, is sort of an amateur Nightmare on Elm Street riff. I wouldn't even call it a ripoff. It's just a very specific variation of the concept. And this one I did write down the story. I remembered to write down the plot. It's a fashion model named Brittany, whose motocross daredevil fiance dies. She then starts being haunted by nightmares where he attacks her. And so you think that's going to be it, but no, it very quickly turns sci-fi as Brittany is hooked up to brain monitors with a psychiatrist with a German accent because of Freud, you see. And her nightmares are recorded on a device. And then it turns out
computer recorded.
Computer recorded so that he can watch the nightmares. And And oh, by the way, she has telekinetic powers. And they've it also, they very nonchalantly dropped that this has been a 3-year period that she's been doing this. And then before the Daredevil biker dies, he gifts his I think their fiance, technically not girlfriend, fiance, the ugliest, most haunting music box thing that I have ever seen.
It's so
It's
terrible.
this sort of Harlequin Jack-in-the-Box clown bursting out of a drum.
And the establishing shot of this item, you can't tell what the fuck it is. It isn't
No.
until later in the movie.
It's all black and white painted, so it just looks like shapes, sort of. And then after he dies, this sort of connects them across the ethereal plane.
Takes her the whole movie to figure out that's what's happening, though.
Well, I think it takes the filmmakers the whole movie to decide that's what's happening. I don't think that was necessarily part of the plan. But it's sort of that's what ties them together. And there's this sort of, to this early part, there's this aura of professionalism. It's very soap opera looking.
It's shot on really professional, soap opera cameras is what I've written down.
Super heightened melodrama, and the weird storytelling choices that is something I really like in amateur horror, where you can tell that these people are only amateurs and that they've never done this before, but that they're probably going to get better at it later if they keep doing it, especially the actors. And that it also seems to be being written on the fly, because there's like a dozen people, like maybe a dozen people wrote this, and some really want to do Nightmare on Elm Street and others really want it to be Carrie. And then someone else wins out, because after all that happens, Brittany goes to the country to relax and ends up at a summer camp for wayward youth. All of whom look like they're almost
13th part 5.
Yeah. All of them look like they're in their 40s. She immediately gets in a fist fight with a black woman because the women and her friends are playing rap music too loudly, which is one of those moments where you feel like the filmmaker might be allowing some really reactionary politics leak out into the film itself.
I was like kind of on the main character's side, and then she sort of revealed herself to be a Karen, and you're like, oh.
Yeah, oh shit, she's beating up a black woman and whining about rap music. And then she hooks up with a childhood friend. And in the meantime, Ricky is the name of the motocross guy. Ricky and Brittany. I thought that was funny. I don't think it's meant to be funny. I just thought it was. Kills her doctor and threatens the mortician who messed up his face. Yeah, it sort of just turns into Friday the 13th, but with a more supernatural version of Jason, who kind of like talks shit like Freddy, and disappears and has like rules around him. So he can only appear when she's asleep or entranced by this Harlequin music box. For a period, it seems like he's going to be this sort of avenging character, because some of the wayward youth attempt to rape her and knock her unconscious, and Ricky appears and kills them. Eventually, takes them a while, and then is it sort of twist that he attacks others while she's sleeping, coupled with her mental anguish. That kind of the way this is, and the sudden shift to rural location. It reminds me. Have you ever seen the 1982 supernatural slasher movie, The Slayer?
I have not.
The Slayer is about people are older, like in their 30s, and the woman is having mental health issues, and so her friend and her husband, or I can't remember his husband or fiance, they all go out into the country, and every time she falls asleep, this horrible monster kills somebody. It would be weird if two filmmakers came to that. I just feel like it has to have been inspired by it. It goes on like that, and it's so close to a regular soap opera, and it never tries to be funny outside of sort of the like one-liners that Ricky makes.
My favorite one-liner that Ricky makes is, I forget exactly how he kills someone, but he killed someone with a stick, and he goes, "It's dangerous to play with sticks."
Yeah, which is totally meaningless.
Like that is the level of humor we're getting from this movie.
So much forced crying. Like basically every woman in the movie has a scene where they're just absolutely emotionally obliterated and is doing the Evan Hansen face.
There is a there is a it's a very I thought Dreamstalker was an embarrassment of riches as far as
Yeah.
just being an inexplicable thing, because it does look much more professional. I think part of that is just sort of the nature of the world of SOV is, very few people who are enjoying these movies these days are actually tracking down videotapes from the era and then putting them in a VCR. What we're seeing is the best possible VHS rip that exists. And a lot of these movies are just like, well, someone uploaded it to YouTube once, so now it kind of just exists in the ether. And whatever problems their videotape had when they did that, that's what the movie now is forever. Like, that's now basically the master, because these are movies that are frequently just neglected and lost to time and stuff like that. And Dreamstalker having this nice Intervision DVD release, it has to be like from the original video negative, and it is like pristine. It's the transfer is great.
Yeah.
So it feels so much more professional. There's like actual production value in terms of seeing the dirt bike race and stuff like that. But then also there are scenes where you can't hear what people are saying because they're filming outside and they didn't have the proper sound equipment. And there's just like a bird in a tree who's too loud. And there's just like, well, I hope this scene wasn't important because I didn't get any of that. And there's a mix of like, the plot feels very Fear Street. Like, if instead of being a professional model, she was a teenager, this would just be like some R.L. Stine novel from the same era. And then at the same time, it's like very sleazy. Like, there's just a lot of nudity and sex. And there's like one of her nightmares, the Ricky is raping her and she's like bleeding. Like, it's like, it gets really gross. At different points, there's an orgy that Ricky kills everyone at the orgy. It's like, it's the weirdest, like, well, we're kind of bored of camping, I guess we should have an orgy kind of setup. So there's a mix of like naivete of like a young adult novel, and then also just like the sleaziness of a direct-to-video horror, and there's the professional production values, but also like total incompetence when it comes to some of them. There's just
the sex scenes feel like late night Cinemax.
Yes,
like
very.
It and which is like its own genre unto itself. This very specific late night pay cable softcore porn stuff. Like it and you don't actually. There's another one that I can't remember. Did you watch Hell Roller?
I did not watch Hell Roller.
Okay, well, I'll talk about that in a little bit. But yeah, it does. It's just like another layer to the onion of this movie, is that like, now what is this now? But it always looks just good enough that like makes it more baffling somehow.
And then it's just this total mishmash of like, there's too many characters and too many subplots, and there's too many wrinkles to like the metaphysical nature of whatever curse is going on with the music box. And like, there's scenes where you're like, okay, they beat Ricky, and then Ricky's back, and then he's gone, and he's back yet. Like, it's so just muddled and strange. And there's an amazing special effect when the quote unquote German doctor falls out of a window in a skyscraper, and it's like a shot from a video game, like a Prince of Persia or something, where he falls from the top of a screen to the bottom of the screen, and then it cuts to the top of a screen that he falls through again to the bottom of the screen.
Yeah.
And it's clearly a green screen that they're like sliding his image past. It's, oh my God, it's so beautiful. And then there's a lot of like,
well, and then he slams his face onto the car, and that's an actual good effect.
Yeah, there's a couple of very good makeup effects. So there's like the mix of competence and incompetence is absolutely wild in this. There's VHS colored lighting is just absolutely fantastic, and there's a lot of really good green and blue or green and purple mix of lighting, which a lot of these SOVs go for red lights. So that was sort of a fun little
refreshing
aesthetic nature. And again, this is like, a normal movie. These are the kinds of things you're like, that doesn't make a movie good. But in an SOV movie, you do kind of be like, all right.
I would argue that Ricky's half face, which is totally a two-face kind of thing.
Yeah,
I would argue that makeup is better than some of the real Freddy Krueger makeup over the years. Especially, I mean, if you're looking back at the TV series or appearances on other things, like, it looks good. It's a good two-face / Freddy Krueger makeup job.
And speaking of shot on video horror, isn't Freddy's Nightmare shot on video?
I believe it was.
Yeah,
If it must have been like professional cameras, not VHS tape, but it must have been
like probably the comparable cameras to what shot Dreamstalker.
what they were using here. Yeah.
So
Um,
I would recommend checking this movie out, especially with a group of people. It's definitely a large.
Yeah, I mean, there's a rape scene, and Ricky the Dream Monster implies that his penis has broken off inside the woman,
It's
which
grody.
is yeah, not the best
With the right
joke.
audience. If you're doing
But
shot on
yeah,
video horror, you already should be involving people who are
yeah.
on board for this sorts of thing.
Well, and the we're speaking about technical things. The funny thing is that Patrick's absolutely right about how awful the sound mix is. But the shocking thing is director Christopher Mills is who isn't actually credited. There was a lawsuit between him and the producers, so it's not, this movie is not credited to any director. But he now works as sound department on big budget TV and movies. He was one of the mixers on Avengers Infinity War. This guy who made this absolutely unlistenable little movie now does full 7.2 DTS HD, mixes for real movies and real theaters. He's apparently a regular with Tyler Perry, and Tyler Perry are buddies. Tyler Perry's on the verge of being shot on video vibe.
Sure. I did not see The Butcher, so that's all you.
Yeah, The Butcher. So the next one is The Butcher, 1991. This is another kids having fun. It was in German with no subtitles, and it's quite literally children. Like some of them, their voices hadn't even changed yet. And a lot of it is them sitting around talking in German, so I don't understand what they're saying. It was made and co-starring Mayak Uday, who continues to make micro-budget movies to this day, including a sequel to this in 2004, another sequel in 2005, and The Bloody Paw of the Ferocious Beast in 2015. He also has a short called Devil's Meat, which might have been shot on video, but cannot be accessed. This is on YouTube. The plot, as I could best figure it out, the plot is that there are three friends who are hanging out, and one of them is accidentally stabbed to death in what is supposed to be a stunt of some kind, or a prank. And he, I don't know what the prank is exactly, but he comes back to life and he goes on a killing spree. And then the people he kills come back as zombies and kill more people. It's pretty entertaining for something made by, again, literal children. The gore effects aren't convincing, but the kids consider lighting and point of view. They have like Evil Dead point of view shots. They add a lot of music and sound effects, more than you would actually hear from some of the adult made movies in this. Like they aren't doing the best job of it, but they understand they're supposed to be layering sound. They steal a bunch of music, and they steal the kiki haha from Jason Voorhees.
Mm-hmm.
The killer himself dresses like Jason in Friday 2 with the sack over his head. I caught one of the songs from City of the Living Dead. And an IMDb review says that they also had a song from Dawn of the Dead that I missed. They have unauthorized footage from Dr. Butcher MD playing on the television. And the zombies are sort of designed to look like the zombies in a Fulci movie. And they even frame some of the shots of people fighting zombies. They frame them the best they can to look like scenes from 1979 movie Zombie. And they get their mom and dad to participate and memorize some lines. Like they call on the phone to look for why is my son not home kind of thing. And it's always fun to see parents supporting their kids. I'm pretty sure the parents were not thrilled when they saw the actual movie, and that they used a power drill for one of the gore effects and lit one of their friends on fire for another one. But yeah, and this is one of those things that I don't understand how this escapes. I think the only way, I mean, like, yeah, these days you can go to YouTube and you can watch anything. They're like actual. I learned about their littlest pet shop dramas that kids and teenagers do, like by moving around their littlest pet shops, and people tune in to watch them. But there's no such thing in the 80s and 90s. So I think the only reason this escaped is because the director kept on making things, and sort of like he's like Ittenbach and what's the other guy's name? can't remember the other guy's name. The
Buddha
other
Buddha
German. Oh, Buttigieg is a little more professional, but like
right.
Ittenbach and there's another one who are basically affects real guys. Olaf Ittenbach and another guy. It's like that, but actual children. And if you want to see it, the director was selling special limited edition tapes of all 3 movies on his Facebook as of this early June is when it was last up. So maybe I'll try to include a link there so people could go buy it if he has any left. And that will take us on to, I believe you watched this one too, Holy Moly, 1991.
Oh, yes. From director Lance Ozanix, who is a North California shock rocker who has sort of a puke-based theatrical rock career. At least he did in the 1990s. It's like 30 minutes long, and it's a Halloween store.
Yeah, well, so yeah, this is a guy who's, I listened to the band. The band's called Schizo. They're pretty good. They've been around for a lot of years, so they've changed up. If you like thrash metal, early, death metal, they're pretty good. But yeah, his whole gimmick is barfing, and I guess he ingests colored things so the barf will look colorful. He's been on Judge Judy and Jerry Springer.
Excellent.
For barfing on people. Somebody sued him. It's Judge Judy, so it wasn't really real. But you can find footage of him on Judge Judy and Jerry Springer on YouTube.
Daytime talk show shock rock episodes are like
Mhm.
a particularly delicious corner of YouTube.
Yeah. And so this appears to be him just, he dresses himself as a priest.
Mm-hmm.
Whose name is literally Holy Moly, which took me a while to figure out. People are calling him Holy. I finally figured it out. And they shot some scenes in a reasonably sizable church. So somebody agreed to let them shoot in there, and he's behind the pulpit and everything. So I guess whatever church that was thought it was funny. He is beaten up, bullied, and ultimately sort of possessed by a tall guy in a trench coat and sunglasses, and suffers nightmares. Where he's haunted by Halloween masks and colorful lights, basically.
Beautiful,
so it is
beautiful moment.
It's got to be their stage stuff, is what I assume. I assume that Schizo has a stage show and they use all their spirit Halloween stuff.
Or he bought a bunch of stuff for this movie, thinking, and then afterwards we can add it to our stage show because it's like that must be a long concert if you're doing all of these gags and stuff.
That's true. That's true. Yeah, so he does he sees these monsters in waking life. He does his throw up gag, which is someone who I'm particularly grossed out by vomiting. Is something really cartoonish about the way he does it that didn't make me feel sick.
No, it's not a Lucifer Valentine kind of thing.
Yeah. He gets drunk to avoid murdering, or he kills one guy in really unconvincing, not bloody, but not convincing attack. And, then is attacked in his apartment and gets his spine pulled out of his butt.
Yep.
It's a little bit.
I do enjoy that bit.
It's a little bit like the second part of Ittenbach's The Burning Moon.
Yes. Yes.
Where a guy just goes on a killing spree. But this actually came out first. Ittenbach is much better at this. His effects are better and his pacing is better.
To give you an idea of like just how much this feels like some guy dicking around with his friends, like there's a scene where there's a fat guy eating ice cream and it's just a guy with a pillow under his shirt. And then later there's a scene where a woman is like pushing a baby stroller and she just has and it's a guy with a pillow under his shirt that are boobs. And it's like, like it's that level of like dumb, like he's a grown ass man, but it's dumb kid shit.
And there's a lot of like everybody's reading Gore Zone and Fangoria magazines constantly. So I don't know if he thought he would get featured if he did enough product placement for them.
It's just him including the stuff he likes, I would imagine.
Yeah. It actually reminded me a lot of the weird things that I had friends in high school I talked about in the other podcast that would shoot action shorts. Like they all wanted to be John Woo, not John Carpenter. And this reminds me of the things that they would do after school, that they were actually a little more talented than this.
all the credits in this are printed on white paper, so it's just like the camera pointed at a white piece of paper that has the credits on it. Like that's the level we're talking about here.
I found the 41-minute cut but there's a much easier to find 30-minute version on YouTube, and I think I might recommend the 30-minute version. I think it cut 11 minutes out of this. It might be a little easier to take.
Yeah, I mean, I did enjoy it, but it is I enjoyed it on that level of just like, this is dumb as hell.
Yeah, and it one other, again, always going back to the soundtrack, he actually lifted some of Ennio Morricone's unused The Thing soundtrack that later showed up in the movie Hateful Eight.
Really?
Yeah, so I'm guessing it was released as part of the soundtrack, because the only place I had heard it before the Hateful Eight was the menu section for the Thing DVD.
Right.
Yeah, he uses some of that.
Um,
They don't use a lot of their own music. I would have thrown in more of my own band's music. I would have made it like a song a minute, basically.
Right. And the sensibility, it's like, yeah, you should probably just put a bunch of dumb thrash and death metal under this. Like, it's that sensibility. So that is a surprising. I did not realize at the time that he was in a shock rock band until I like went and looked it up. And yeah, that is surprising that he didn't do that. The next 4 movies we have here, neither of us were able to track down and see, so I can summarize them shortly. Are they all from? Yes, they're all from 1991. We have Vampire Trailer Park, which was directed by Steve Latshaw, who is probably best known for his alien ripoff Dark Universe and his jack-o'-lantern slasher movie Jacko. My understanding is that the appeal of Vampire Trailer Park, as far as it exists, is that it is a very specific time and place, like very much Florida kind of a movie. It's a little more character driven than a lot of movies on this list, and it's massively stupid, apparently. So there's that. We have Neighborhoods from 1991. It's also known as Devil Snow. It's directed by Lenny Hassan and James Adam Tucker. Lenny Hassan never made another movie, but James Adam Tucker went on to make a bunch of other like low budget direct-to-video horror, crime, and even a comedy movie. Neighborhoods, it starts off as this like buddy cop movie, and then it turns into, and every review I read sort of mentioned the same thing, which is it turns into a surprisingly intense and realistic addiction drama about a crack addict. But then she smokes crack that turns her into a zombie, and then it becomes a zombie movie.
Of course.
So there is, I think, the monster part happens much later, and it is a thing where for a while you don't even know if it's necessarily a horror movie, because it spends so much time on highly realistic, borderline verite drug addiction narrative. And it's notable because it's a rare shot on video movie that's sort of shot in poor neighborhoods in LA. So it's, not white guys in the suburbs, which I find interesting. James Adam Tucker, who is the person who involved in this, who went on to do other stuff, he is also one of the few black shot on video filmmakers. We have Way Bad Stone by Archie Wow. He never did anything else. This is also from Florida. It's a sword and sorcery movie with LARPers. A lot of the reviews I read sort of imply that like this kind of feels like most of these people have been pulled from like Ren fairs and like actual LARPers and stuff. And there's like a real attention to detail that is sort of appreciable. It mostly takes place like outdoors, so it kind of hides the fact that it's modern times fairly well. And another thing that really intrigued me is someone described it as vaguely Andy Milligan-ish, like the period pieces that Andy Milligan would do, like Torture Dungeon and stuff.
It was definitely one that sounded like it could be fun just by the description, but it also sounded like it might not have been a horror movie. Exactly.
Right. This is one of the ones that's like kind of borderline, maybe if a dark wizard is dark enough, it becomes horror.
It does say the letterbox thing. The tagline is 39 gruesome deaths.
Okay. Well, there you go. I mean, that could just be marketing.
Good
and
marketing.
then we already talked about Death by Love when we were talking about Dreamstalker. So I don't need to go into that again.
So
Hellroller, I did not see.
Yeah, you didn't miss much. So Hellroller, 1992, written and directed by Gary J. Levinson, who appears and performs in a bunch of Z-grade horror movies. He was in Shockwaves, the Nazi zombie movie. He's in Surf Nazis Must Die. He's in Cannibal Hookers, where he also acted as assistant director to our old friend Donald Farmer. He is not the lead. Eugene is played by Ron Littman, who can be seen the following year as a DJ in Wayne's World. So not a huge career, but he was in Wayne's World the next year. And it's also starring Mary Woronov from Rock and Roll High School, Death Race 2000, E. Raoul fame, who plays Eugene's adopted mother. My assumption is that this Livingston was just friends with her because she's only in the first couple scenes, and then she is killed, and that sets Eugene on a murder spree. Eugene is
that also makes her one of the very few, if not celebrity, one of the very few name actors who ever appeared in a shot-on-video horror movie.
Yeah. And the funny thing is she's half-assing it, and she's still kind of good. She just can't be bad. There's a flashback. We find he's in a wheelchair, and they appear to be homeless or mostly homeless, and he's in a wheelchair, and that hence Hell Roller. And we discover that in the flashback he is in a wheelchair because he was crippled when his mother was raped by conjoined twins. It's a pretty good elevator pitch if you're gonna make a trauma movie. A guy in a wheelchair goes on a killing spree to get revenge, and it could be described as a slasher, but it's more like, again, Combat Shock or Maniac, where it's really focusing on miserable characters being miserable in a miserable urban environment and slaughtering people in miserable ways. It tries to be offensively funny in the tradition and does not succeed even once. And it feels like it wants to be basket case or street trash, especially with how many homeless people are involved in the plot. And it's kind of annoying because the filmmakers are clearly punching down by having, schizophrenic homeless people as the butt of the joke. But then there'll be like moments where they'll have footage from the local news, and people will be talking about how unfair we treat homeless people and stuff. So they're like kind of having their cake and eating it too situation. I suppose the satirical news breaks are almost funny, but they're mostly annoying. And the thing that makes it sort of interesting is that if you just take the parts of the movie that are him going on his vengeance spree, it's probably only 20 minutes long. It feels to me like he was friends with actresses who wanted to break into the late night softcore market and shot these things as some sort of promo reels for his friends, because there's a really long erotic aerobic workout from sexploitation star Michelle Bauer, I suppose, that is then followed by her bathing that in a bubble bath just as long. And it's seriously feels like about 10 minutes of just this. And then a different adult film star, Hippolytia Lee, who looks so much like Bayer in the VHS quality, I thought that it was the same actress again. Because it was fuzzy. I was like, oh, here she is again. And she is in the same apartment, which I'm guessing is just Livingston's apartment, doing very long improvised strip dance and then a shower scene. They're both killed, so it is something in the plot, but the scenes are so long and specific that I really think that like they were, can you give me a demo reel for Playboy or something like that? And I think it might have paid off because Bauer was in a video short called Sexercise a couple years later in 94.
Excellent. Core competencies.
So, yeah. It paid
Attractive
off.
lady exercising. What could we, just a license to print money.
Yeah, exactly. So there are basically no murders because it's hard to do. But there is a really gross shot of Lee after she's been eviscerated, and they really covered her in fake intestines. It's pretty gross. And there's a kind of funny part where Eugene impales two women with a really dull wooden dowel. And then there's another like totally unattached scene where a sex worker is kidnapped and unassailant tortures her with an iron. That again just feels like it was some sort of demo for the actress. Livingston planned and filmed a sort of follow-up entitled Beast about a one-armed cop battling flesh-eating Satanists, but died during post-production and it remains unfinished. So, yeah, I didn't really enjoy myself watching this one.
Does not sound like it.
Hollywood vows to the flood of new blood.
Hey everybody, this ended up going longer than I intended, which shouldn't come as a surprise. I'm going to release part 2 in a couple weeks, and you'll have one big, long addendum then. In the meantime, you can find me on Twitter at @GabeMPowers, at Genre Grinder, on the Genre Grinder website, or on the Genre Grinder Facebook page. Thanks for listening, and stay tuned for part 2. Bye.
Blood stays alive. Hollywood's new blood.